Hello everyone, Andrea here with Nutrition Commission. The topic is the importance of gut health. Actually going to just give you some brief explanation of what do we really mean by that, followed by some key tips. So what do we mean by gut health? Our gut, the intestinal lining, okay, which basically runs from our mouth to our anus, okay? And along that, we can call it that gut lining, is first of all our immune cells. There's about 70%, and depending on what where you're pulling your research or your data, it could vary anywhere from 65 to 80% of our immune cells actually live in that lining, which is pretty incredible actually. But then in the gut, so really from, we can look at really the stomach through to the anus basically, our majority of our gut bacteria. But actually in the colon or the large intestine, okay, so that's kind of the last stage of our elimination process before we excrete with bowel movements. That's where actually the lion's share of our gut flora resides. There's some in the small intestines too, but most of it is in the large intestine, just so people understand what are we really talking about here. So what I want to do is just explain a little bit about why this good gut bacteria is so darn important, okay? Number one, first of all, it supports good digestion. So it's going to help with really to help you with good bowel movements, number one, okay? It regulates pathogen growth. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if we have a lot of good gut bacteria, it's going to crowd out the bad bacteria. We don't want bad bacteria, okay? Because that over time starts to chew away, if you will, for lack of a better word, starts to chew away at the intestinal lining. So does anyone here, have the bloating, the constipation, autoimmune disorders, right? Where you have inflammation of joints, a lot of chronic pain, which most of my group members now that are here, that's pretty much what everybody's dealing with, some sort of autoimmune condition, right? So if we don't have a good amount of gut bacteria, good gut bacteria, to crowd out the bad guys, over time, that lining is going to break down. And when does that happen? What happens when that occurs? Well, that's the leaky gut syndrome. Over time, food is going to wiggle through that intestinal lining into the blood, and that's where the immune response comes in, triggering that seek out and destroy and attack mode. And over time, that's where our antibodies kick in, and we actually have, chronic pain or autoimmune disorders. So when we step back, we think about, oh, okay, of course I'm going to remove all the yucky foods, okay, and that's a given. But if I'm really trying to get to a better place with my gut health, first step, remove some of these trigger foods, which I'll talk about in a minute. But also we want to maintain the integrity of the intestinal lining, which is a fancy way of saying we want to make sure we have a lot of good gut bacteria to crowd out the bad guys. Okay, so that's kind of number two, the critical benefit of good gut bacteria. Good gut bacteria also, this is almost really important as women, it helps to support proper hormone detox. Okay, so, and I'm going to try not to go too deep on you, but it's hard. I want you all to understand this, especially as women, because of a whole host of reasons, and I could probably do just a live on this topic of estrogen dominance, but especially as we move into menopause, our hormones obviously are really out of whack. Estrogen, I was estrogen, progesterone positive cancer type, so I already had all the signs of dominance. And our good gut bacteria is what's going to, basically it's like think of it almost like a sponge, and it's going to collect all that excess circulating estrogen that's running around in our body that has not been excreted, yet. It's been digested and what have you, but it needs to be removed out of the body. And if we don't have good bacteria or good gut flora, we don't have that sponge to collect it and remove that excess hormone circulating in the body out. And we really want that, because if we have a lot of kind of this unused hormones that have just not been excreted, then those get recirculated back into the body, in addition to the others that are being produced in the body. So you end up getting that dominant situation. We don't want that. So that's another reason why we need to have, create an environment for good gut bacteria. It also, interestingly enough, it also makes B vitamins, you guys, B vitamins. We need B vitamins. If any of us are stressed, you need a lot of B vitamins, okay? And actually, our good gut flora also helps us to absorb and utilize the food we are eating. So for all those reasons, and there's many, many more, of course, supporting our immune system, those are the reasons why we want to be very mindful about trying to create or maintain good gut health. It's interesting too, because our gut, of course, is also connected through nerves and hormones to the brain. So if any of us are bloated and when you're constipated, you've got indigestion, or you're burping, or maybe GERD, those are sure tell signs that you're having digestion dysfunction. And then if we don't address it, and a lot of times people think, well, I've got such bad heartburn, let me take some antacids. That's actually the worst thing you could do. Okay, so we want to really maintain the overall digestive health, and there's a whole different a whole professional function around just gut health, because it's really so sophisticated. It's quite mind-blowing, really. But for today's purposes, again, I just want you to understand those are the reasons why it's so important for us to maintain our gut health. And I'm just focusing on one little piece, which is that good gut bacteria that we want to cultivate, no pun intended, but cultivate in our body. And I'm going to just give you a couple ways that you can consider being more mindful of that this week, or even after we kind of conclude today. Number one, okay, we want to ensure we're getting plenty of fiber in our diet. And that's the number one basic premise. We want plenty of good fiber-rich foods. And where do those come from? Again, our greens, so vegetables, and I'm going to call out low glycemic fruits, because I don't want us eating a bunch of sweet things that are going to spike your sugar, like we talked about a couple weeks ago. And we want to also just introduce more fermented foods. Now, again, I say that with caution, because a lot of people say, well, what probiotics should I start taking? Everybody's body is different, and depending on where you are, let's say in the pendulum of pain or symptoms that are showing up, like extreme bloat, or just pain when you eat, these are things that you want to definitely, where, I'm happy to work with you, obviously, one-on-one, but you don't want to be taking a bunch of fermented foods, because you actually can really hurt yourself. It'll really create a lot of pain. But fermented foods, if we are, if you're here and you're not experiencing more severe symptoms, sometimes that can show up as SIBO, for example. That's why I wouldn't recommend trying to take a probiotic if you have a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth right now. But if you introduce kefir and some plain unsweetened yogurts, which have, of course, some natural probiotics in them, that should be fine. And you could also introduce sauerkrauts as part of your diet. And that has been one of my main go-tos every day, by the way. I also want to just suggest two more things. Number one, please, 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 please avoid all artificial sweeteners. Avoid them all. Not only are, the aspartames, there's so much clinical research now around the damaging effects of artificial sweeteners, but I'm mentioning it as a special call out today because not only does artificial sweeteners, it actually, again, it's part of the brain activity. It's going to trigger you to want to eat more, believe it or not. Not sure if you guys were aware of that, but artificial sweeteners almost like flips a switch in your brain with our appetite regulating hormones, and it's going to make you overeat and have cravings. So that's why, number one, don't do those, but artificial sweeteners are really, really hard on the gut lining. Okay, and it's going to prevent you from actually taking in the sugars from the natural sources like fruits. They're like blockers almost. It's really, it's insane that these are even legal, quite frankly. And then the final tip I would give you is, of course, making sure we're drinking plenty of water every day. Half your body weight in ounces must be consumed daily. And that's for a variety of reasons, but I would just tell you, we want to spark good bowel movements. We want the wastes, we want the toxins, etc., flushed out of the body, flushed out of the cells. But I will also give you one more tip that it's becoming more and more common that everybody's having these digestive issues. So if you haven't already invested in a bottle of Bragg's apple cider vinegar, I highly recommend you make sure you pick some up and make sure you get the one that says with mothers. I think it's what the claim or the label is. And I can take a picture if you guys need. But before you eat, this is a tip around improving your overall digestion of the foods you are eating, especially when we have autoimmune disorders. Because the intestinal lining is already compromised. Okay, and that's, again, combination of things, toxins, diet, stress, etc., and also poor amounts of good gut bacteria. But if we're doing apple cider vinegar, like a tablespoon, if you can work up to a teaspoon to a tablespoon, and then with your glass of water, just a cup of water, drink that before each meal. And that is going to actually help your stomach acid. It's like a trigger for your stomach acid to turn on, and it's going to help produce more stomach acid. So by the time your food gets there, it helps to break it down. And why is that important? Because if I'm eating any kind of food, it naturally has bad bacteria on it or pathogens, God forbid, and your stomach acid is needed to kill it, right? And that's what we want. We don't want that traveling through the system to erode the gut lining. So those would be my 4 tips in terms, again, just getting started. Focus on fiber-rich foods, your beans, your greens. Lentils are a really good choice. Half a cup of lentils. Those have become my go-to, really, for a good plant-based protein that's low glycemic spike. So you're not going to get that, big sugar spike thing. And introduce fermented foods. Start slow, because again, if we have digestive compromise, you don't want to, devour a bunch of probiotic rich foods, because that'll create pain. Okay, kind of ease into it, and remove all artificial sweeteners, and drink water plus apple cider vinegar for each meal. You can drink it or sip it even throughout the day. No shame in that. It helps with the inflammation too. And love to hear any feedback. Did you learn something new today? Or is there something else you want me to dive in further? I'd be happy to do so. So thank you for being here. We will talk very soon. And in the meantime, you know where to find me. And all my best. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk very soon. Bye-bye, ladies.